welcome to this edition of What the Fuck Happenings here. Yeah, dude, I God, I don't know. Anyway, displaced from even my Inmendham channel. So I've not only been kicked out of the town, I've been removed from my screen name home. Anyway, it doesn't really matter. So, yes, a non-YouTube video. Whatever that means. A video, not... doesn't matter. Anyway, so I did look under Inmendham for the last month just to see if there was some sort of videos. And I guess there are that I just don't pay attention to because I just couldn't care less lately. So we might play some of this, whatever this whack job is. But anyway, I don't know, we'll see how things go. You know, tired and cold. There's always some complaint. There's always something to complain about, I suppose. You know, life is just a little bit... It has its not smooth moments. But anyway, so I was thinking of talking about value, you know, and how it's derived, because there's an awful lot of nihilists out there. And the whole argument about what a artificial intelligence would be able to do with its intelligence. You know, if you were to give an artificial intelligence or some freedom to program itself, to observe and draw conclusions, you know, what you could expect it to do with this better intelligence. And I would argue that it's not even going to be intelligence, because to be intelligent you really do have to know what feelings are and what people feel. How they feel about different things is different. It's sort of evidence that the feeling mechanism isn't a very good way to derive value, because it's like the religious argument. If the stories aren't any more superior than any other stupid story, and so it's either like most of them are wrong opinions, you know, or they're all wrong, pretty much. Doesn't seem very likely that one of the things from that source, this terrible source where 99.99% of the arguments are wrong, that somehow that 1% would be right even. Just doesn't seem a good source, and that's part of the problem with this whole argument, is that it gets mixed into a bunch of personal, subjective feelings about life rather than reasoned thoughts about what life does, how it functions, and what its the real implications are, in terms of the fact that it's an imposition. The fact that you can't get consent doesn't really matter. Doesn't change the fact that you didn't get consent. So, the reasoned arguments are clear in terms of the aggressiveness of imposition, and but that really wasn't going to be the subject of this video. It's more just about deriving the underlying value, just to recognize the fact that there is a distinction between feeling good and feeling bad, and the distinction is real, and the value, the fact that there's a value difference, every feeling being should be able to agree on that. They shouldn't be playing some really stupid game where they pretend, well, you could all be simulations in a computer, and I'm the only real thing, and so therefore I'm the only thing feeling, and you're all faking it. You're all some projection, intended to fool me. I mean, that's such a bold reach, and such an improbable truth, that they should be able to concede they can't get away with that as an argument. They should be able to concede that, but they don't. Yeah. So what's, this is search for some perfect way to explain, and there just isn't one that, I mean, perfect is, it's there somewhere, and I'm reaching for it as somebody with defective reaching skills, for this perfect argument or this perfect way to make the argument, and how to progressively influence the organization of every single listener. Every listener is listening to every word. They all have their own distractions, plaid, got a little blemish over here, a little ingrown hair. I mean, their eyes are going all over the place. Their brain is making up all kinds of contextual stories, based on what they notice, what their brain pattern matches. And so even when you use every single word you use and every bit of emphasis you place on a word, there's somebody who says, ooh, that makes me hot, and there's somebody else who says, ooh, that's disgusting. So no matter what you do, it's so hard to come up with some sort of generic performance that will invoke the listening response, pay attention, then try to organize your own thoughts on that subject, those words, what do they mean to you? So for a lot of people, value just means some kind of notion of a overlying purpose, and so they'll think that, well, value is decided by, say, the social contract. It's just that simple, and they just really don't think of any bigger picture. So if the social contract says you have to wear your seatbelt because 93% of the time it'll do you more good than harm, but there are those 7% of the times when it's not going to do you any good, and you would have been better off if you didn't wear it. Now, the argument would be that most people can't figure out when those times would be, and so, when you have those special circumstances, so it still seems a reasonable prohibition against never using, any moment not using your seatbelt, because there's no way you're predicting that you're going to be better off without it. It seems the odds are against you, and it's an irrational bet. Okay, it's just that simple. You'd have to have some sort of special universal ESP senses, spidey senses or something to be able to figure this out, because there's no way to do it rationally or logically. So so some people have a lot of confidence in social contracts, in the sense that, if I don't murder you, you won't murder me. We make some agreement. But clearly that doesn't work. There are people who need killing, and so that they don't end up getting killed. It's that simple. And we see lots of those flaws in the system where, they had Bundy in jail, and, and they let him casually escape, and people are dead because of it, and blah 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 blah. Now you could argue that some of those people might have been better off dead, but the torture part, I guess, compensates for that, because they certainly weren't better off being tortured, I don't think. So we let bad thing happen because we're invested in a contract that is vague and doesn't really get to the deserve thing. It doesn't really allocate based on any real definition of, say, fairness. It just does it based on a general principle that, well, statistically, 67% of the time, they'll do the right thing, and that's better than the inverse. So it's this marginal improvement in performance that people cling to. So anyway, so values are kind of complicated by the fact that it gets into what people are valuing isn't necessarily the essence of the thing, the kernel of it. They're valuing things that are well abstract and that emerge from that fact. So I could argue that the only reason why anything has value is because it'll negatively affect the sentience experience, you could argue. So some of us understand that sentience or feelings or having a good day or a bad day is a syndrome that happens to more than just humans. That all the primates and certainly most of the mammals and blah blah, you can go through the list. Lots of organisms are having a thing called a good day and a bad day, um, and that's worth valuing. It's in some sort of pure sense. There would be no, if there wasn't artificial intelligence, I would argue that he would conclude it's always better to improve that performance. If you can make something have a good day instead of a bad day without making anything else have a bad day instead of a good day, without some rotten trade-off, if you can make one thing happy without making another thing sad, well, you should make that thing happy, because there's value in improving the state of that sentient being's condition, period. But then this gets into this whole, the argument gets further complicated, because the question of value doesn't necessarily have anything to do with what's happening at this one moment. So then you have this whole context of, like, feeding starving people. Well, you feed the starving people, and then they have more babies that they can't afford to feed, and therefore you have to feed their babies too. And it gets, and so on and so on, and it gets to be a huge, gigantic liability. Now, you did the right thing. You improved people's condition. You bandaged a wound. But the problem is, you bandaged the wound on a wound maker, on somebody who's going to make more wounds for you to bandage in the future. And so it wasn't productive, even though it was right by the simple value definition. As far as you thought about it, it wasn't right when you really think about it. So I mean, I have written in the past. I probably should try to find some of this old writing, in my youth, about charity, and the fact that I sort of made the argument that I like that people are trying to help other people, but there's so many things wrong with the way charity is provided, in the sense that the charity becomes just an industry, and it just becomes a business trying to make enough money to support the business, and it doesn't really do much charity. And then if it does do charity, it does charity in the sense that it basically rewards people for bad behavior, and that's not a good idea. So, but I made the argument from the more liberal position, in the sense that I was focused on the fact that the problem shouldn't exist in the first place, and that you have to fix the problem of poverty and all this other stuff. You can't just walk away and be cruel, but you can't fix it by rewarding it. So you have to find some other way to fix it, besides rewarding it. So I've always used these carrot and stick kind of arguments. If there's too many people, you don't, punish people. You don't prohibit people from having kids. You don't do any of that stuff, but you encourage them not to. So that means that you give them free condoms, or you subsidize the behavior you want. So you give them more money if you give them more food aid based on lowering their population rather than increasing it. Or lowering their rate of increase. So for every lowering of the rate of increase, you get another $1 billion worth of UN food, so you all live better. So you encourage the behavior you want rather than punish the behavior, and that'll give you this long-term effect where you're gaining more with your effort to bandage a wound. Because you're bandaging the right wound the right way, and the evil wounds, the wounds that will cause more trouble if bandaged, you have them in a cage or something. You'll bandage the wound maker, you'll bandage his wounds, but you'll put him in a cage so he can't make more wounds. Some sort of logic like that. So I can only do this with these kinds of stories or analogies, or set up some sort of little play to demonstrate, with little puppets to tell the story, because the concepts really haven't been dealt with in real conversations by the human race about getting to the real causes and getting to the real what it's really made out of. So underlying all that again is this theme of trying to separate subjective impressions, like what flavor of ice cream you like, versus, what's your favorite flavor, versus your liking of ice cream. And those two are kind of different subjects. I mean, one of them you could argue is just purely subjective, based on a lot of silly little nuances that couldn't make a difference. And the fact that you do like ice cream, though, could probably be logically tied to the fact that, the proteins and whatnot have the right stimulating power to be a compelling, the right sweetness to fat content to all this other bullshit. That, of course, it's going to be a food that humans would, generally speaking, gravitate to. So you can understand the difference. Like, one's just a fact. Humans tend to like ice cream. What flavor they like, again, is not so factual. There's nothing superior about one flavor over another by any kind of rational standards. Although there probably is to some extent, just the intent that people tend to like chocolate. So yes, so if you put another thing that's overtly likable in the ice cream, well, then you've got double likability. It's not only ice cream, but it's chocolate ice cream. So I guess I'm just pointing out how the real value is kind of a complex thing to find, but I mean, in a sense, it's right in front of us, in the sense of what's the thing that really matters is how I feel, not so much why I feel it, or exactly how I'm made to feel, what the brain does to actually create the sensation. So a lot of people use this catch because we don't have photographs of feelings, where you could say, oh, that's a feeling, and it, looks like Satan or something. Like, say you could photograph the exact mechanisms, the minimum amount of brain required to create some sort of bad sensation, nausea or something. And you just say, ooh, that's a bad sensation. Well, if I took a picture of it, it's not going to look bad. It's not going to look different than this thing by our ability to see differences. And so some people use that as an excuse to say it. Sorry. It's a little subtle noise. Bad jack on the speakers. The way they make things, I mean, the wire is built into the speaker, so the wire goes bad. You're fucked having to splice the wire. Anyway, because they want to spend the 15 cents for a jack. But anyway, all those little things you can just argue about how, the short-sightedness of investing, basically incentivizing shortcuts, because they can get away with it. Because, that's it, because they can get away with it. I just had that with the domain name, in my Fairness First Party thing that I have to work on, actually. In terms of creating a new party, because obviously the Democrats are just the give it all to the broken and stupid. Let them do anything they want. Let them just run free. Retards rule. It's basically the retards rule party. And your alternative, again, I'm saying, if I have a choice between the Nazis or the retards rule, I'm going to vote for the retards rule. But it's a horrible choice. It just absolutely sucks. So yeah, there needs to be a new party that just says, no, get real. The get real fucking party. But anyway, I thought Fairness First was a decent name, because everything really just comes down to being fair and not doing this imposing thing, and not pretending, even if you're physically crippled, but I mean, you're crippled, you're disabled. Don't pretend that makes you special. Okay, it makes you a liability. Yeah, and so if you're going to be a liability, you should be damn grateful, fucker. Um, and you should recognize when it's totally impractical. You're blind and you want to play golf, and they have to clear the whole golf course, and they have to have 10 people to tell you where to stand, and I mean, it's you go golfing one day and it costs $358,000. You have to know that that's not practical. And you have to know that if you need somebody to go with you to school to tell you everything's okay, calm down, it's all right, you'll be okay. It's only two. Don't be afraid of the two. The plus sign doesn't. No, it's not saying it hates you. The plus sign is not saying that. Just calm down. I mean, if you need that, you're fucked up. Okay, and you're way too expensive. You're way too high maintenance. We could take care of 100 people and make them improve their life greatly with the money you're pissing away on learning 2 plus 2 when you should be doing it on the internet anyway. So, I mean, there's ways we spend money that are insane because parents think their kids are worth it. No, he's retarded, but he's special. And, I need $358,000 a year to take care of him. Fuck you. Should be, I mean, the fairness for party would just say, fuck you in a nice way. Look, I understand that you love your kid, but you do understand there's a whole bunch of these homeless cats out here, right? Because you love one particular one because of your own little personal thing, because he's yours. That doesn't mean that we should be insane in how we distribute food. You do understand that, right? That we only have so much resources and we can't be pissing it all away on you special needs fuckers when there's all kinds of people with just as special needs. Anyway, that's a real sidetrack. Shouldn't get into politics, but you just go on and on and on. But the idea of the party would be just let's get to what's the real rudimentary fairness issue. Are you allowed to be offended by words? No, not really. Are you allowed to be this, all those kind of things. What are you allowed to be offended by? Well, if somebody blows leaves on your fucking property, you're allowed to be offended. They throw litter in the street, you're allowed to be offended. There's lots of things you're allowed to be offended by. But there's lots of things you aren't. But anyway, that are impositions, unnecessary impositions. That's what you're looking for. Unnecessary trespasses. And it kind of depends on the word necessary. Oh, I won't be happy unless I get to trespass. The psycho killer can say, I'm not happy unless I'm psycho killing. That's still not necessary that you psycho kill, so frankly, you're just not going to be allowed to do it. Frankly. So, and it really gets to the core thing, this whole argument, where you have all these people who never had to actually do anything in their life because they inherited it. Okay, they inherited their privilege, their friends, their connections, their whole life basically was inherited. And then they point their fingers at other people and say, that guy's a jerk, that guy's lazy, that guy's and that's just bullshit. I mean, that is so unfair. When you haven't earned it and you're going to go tell other people how to earn it, wow. That's fucked up. So that's what it should be about. Realistically. Anyway, so, kind of off the subject. It's really not, because it's all of these subjects, there is the kernel, the stuff that really means stuff, and this argument about strawberry versus raspberry, it's just a bullshit argument because it's really not the argument. The argument is something deeper and more elemental and more fundamental about what you value, because all of this can be understood as trade-offs. To have this, you're going to have this, and this. There's going to be things you have to accept as a price paid for having what you want. And sometimes that price isn't going to be paid by you, which makes it really important that you're doing it the right way. It's this whole going to war thing and everything else. A bunch of people voting for the war they're not going to go to the war. They're immune from going to the war. Well, maybe they shouldn't be voting for the war then. because until they prove that they have something called integrity, you know, or they agree that, well, if I sign up for the war, then, I'm signing up to be subjected to some proportional sacrifice. And it's hard to come up with a proportional sacrifice, right? I mean, like you pull you don't go to the war, but instead you have to pull, terrible things out of a hat in terms of burdens, like you have to pay $30,000, or you have to spend 10 years working at a homeless shelter, or whatever the thing would be. Some egregious compromise that would somehow make your sacrifice comparable to somebody being killed or having their face blown off, or pretty hard to make it's hard to come up with a good thing you can do that would be equal to the badness of having your face blown off or something. Just hard to imagine what that good thing would be that would make that would be comparable. So it's hard to convert. It's hard to find productive action that has the same value as horribly bad results. Because it really isn't about who caused the face getting blown off. It really isn't about any. It's just the fact that that's the price you're paying for your civilization, is faces have to get blown off. And now you're trying to think of some way you can make an equitable exchange for that, and it's hard to find that in anything humans are doing, or what they're investing in, which is crap. So I just noticed, I read a little bit there, I saw the word Jews, Joos, and Jugal, so maybe I won't play that video. I guess we should play them, just because this is the whole scapegoaty, superficial way of looking at things. It's just totally irrational. There's, by percentages, you could profile black people in America, for example, and you could profile them and say they're more likely to be this and more likely to be that, more likely to be that. Well, they're not more likely because they're black. They're more likely because they more likely grew up in poverty, or they were more likely raised by somebody who wasn't very civilized. More likely to be a drug addict, more likely to be reckless, more likely to be too young. Those are the reasons. The cause doesn't have anything to do with ethnicity and color and all that kind of crap. It has to do with the fact that people are raised certain ways, and often they're raised certain ways profilable by an ethnicity, but it doesn't have anything to do with their genetic character. It has to do with their cultural character. And this isn't that shouldn't be a hard thing for people to concede. That you're just making this way too simple to say the cause is skin pigment. Bullshit. Or the cause is whatever Jewness is. That somehow that's what did it. When I guess I would argue that maybe Jews are a little too smart. They're raised with a little bit too, they're too clever. So instead of having some hard ethical core that actually means something, I mean, in a way, you could argue that some of the Jewish religion is a concession to that, because they're so wishy-washy. Their rules are they know they're silly. Like, they know they're just habits. That they really aren't scientific deductions. They're just learned through experience deductions. It's a bunch of Benjamin Franklinisms. An apple a day keeps the doctor away. It's a bunch of that crap is all that religion is made out of. And so it's kind of trivial, the ritual and the bullshit, wishing on a star or something. And so they lose connection between the fact that the idea is this idea of being civilized, doing things that in the long run are beneficial, and they see them as just rituals, and they don't really get the idea that these are the principles that will enable you to survive. Now, the other part of that is, as much of it is based on this whole tribalism and the idea of the fact that in historical history, you did have to fight for your survival, and it was very ethnic, and it was very territorial, like what region you came from and all of that kind of stuff, and that would decide whether you lived or died. And so your regional customs, if you had regional customs that didn't have something to do with defending your tribe wasn't going to survive. And so I mean, you can come up with lots of rational reasons for why people tend to be certain ways, and it doesn't have anything to do with anything, grossly simple. It has something to do with the fact that there's a whole chain of circumstances, or a group of circumstances, that cause and effect, and you have to get to the real causes. And the real causes are that they grow up not really understanding empathy. They think empathy is a job. Okay, they don't think that it's some sort of reasoned imperative. That you have an obligation to be it whether you feel it or not. In the sense, you have an obligation to account for consequences. But anyway, I don't want to get into some argument about what percentage of Jews are greedy, or tribal, or all of that kind of crap. I'm just saying that we all can be profiled based on a class we fit into. Clearly, the long hair, blonde, long hair. I can be profiled into something, a drug user, an idiot, have a band somewhere, blah, blah, blah. And so just, frankly, it's unfair to use that against me in any serious way. You want to just do it in a casual way, a meaningless way, then it's fine. But the fact is that people are using these profiles to generate interest in actions that are going to be detrimental, like putting people in concentration camps. And these aren't the rules that should get you into camp. But, you could make the argument there's a huge correlation between sneaker wearing and breaking into houses. That lots of criminals are smart enough to wear sneakers. So there's a huge correlation. Now, do we sit there and ban sneakers if we want to stop crime? It just isn't getting to the core, the real thing, where it starts. So again, just to try to put this, this is about a little too much to model in a casual conversation, but getting to the point is that when people are judging value, they're not judging it based on the kernel, and I would argue the kernel is just the sentient organism. And so if you're going to judge whether life is a success on earth, you can't do it based on, well, my family's doing good, grandma and grandpa are happy in the home, and my wife likes shopping, and I make enough money, and my kids aren't overtly a blight on society. Maybe they are in their private life, but I don't know about that. Well, anyway, some bullshit, and say everything's fine, because that's fine, when we know everything's not fine. So even though we're doing this great job of, you could argue that we've taken a lot of the real attrition out of nature. Women in the past had to have 8 or 10 kids, and lots of them would die doing it. Lots of them, maybe 30% of female mortality was childbirth. So their 6th or 7th or 8th kid would kill them. More likely, I guess, than the first. I guess the first and the last are the worst ones. The first and the 10th, the ones most likely to kill you, I suppose. But huge attrition. And so we've taken a lot of that out because we've gotten rid of this whole infant mortality thing, and made our existence a little more civilized in the sense that we're not killing nearly as many kids. Where 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, we killed a lot of kids to live. To live, you had to kill a lot of your brothers and sisters. Your life had to cost something. They'd have to get the plague, or they get this, or they get that, or they die in some horrible way. They're born defective, and they have to live a life of misery and poverty and all that kind of crap. just, you don't even want to think about the ones born with a little bit of a mental problem, and how they were treated. Leprosy, all kinds of just horrible stuff. And so the price of existing was a lot higher. Now, even now, it's still not fixed, in the sense that the cost of my survival or my existence could be seen from my perspective as the attrition of my sister dying from cancer at 30, whatever, 2 or something. 6, 5, well, whatever, somewhere in there. Those are the kind of things I should pay attention to. Anyway, well, there's so many things to pay attention to. So much to store in one little brain. But anyway, so in a way you could look at it as, this is the price of your existence, is that, 1/4 of you will have to die of cancer, slowly and over 5 or 6 years, and blah, 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 blah. These are all prices paid, and would I want to impose those prices to validate my existence? So if I knew it before I was going to step into the existence pool, before I was going to take that step into that, oh, it's lovely warm water and blah, 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 some sort of place I want to go, and Disneyland, whatever. So, and to cross the threshold of Disneyland, I'm told, well, this is sort of the price of your, going to Disneyland, is that we also built this park over here called Looney Land, where the lunatics have to go. And then there's this other little place called Retarded Land, and the retards will have to go there. And then there's just Bad Luck Land, where, a piano falls on you and breaks your spine, you're paralyzed for the rest of your life. There's Unlucky Land, and then there's just Mortality Land, Dying Badly Land, Nursing Home Land, Alzheimer's Land. There's all these other places that things are going to have to go when I step over that line. Now, if I know that ahead of time, I'm saying a reasonable artificial intelligence. So if you gave an artificial intelligence absolute knowledge of suffering, being in a nursing home, pooing your own pants, all that kind of, humiliation, just hating, you're just in such pain, and you just can't get the pain to leave, and you're just in constant, always wincing your eyes, and you just spend the rest of your life wincing and going, everything is this, I have to constantly think over this noise of pain, and I can't get anything done because the pain just keeps interrupting my trains of thought. Living in that horror. You give him a taste of it. Give him a few minutes of that. Give him a few minutes of feeling these terrible sensations, and just to get an idea of it. And then tell me that this artificial intelligence is going to say, oh, it's worth it for this little fun feeling, this little, whatever the fun feeling is, I can't, without just getting crude, in terms of sensation creation, just because I'm getting a little distant from this idea of something is actually fun. Things are fun maybe the first time, but once you know what it's made out of, it's not so much fun anymore. But something enjoyable. And, most of those enjoyments are just kind of, it's enjoyable, but it's really not super great, fantastic, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, But anyway, how could it sit there and say, yes, I'm going to step over that line and create those other places for things to be? It's not possible. And clearly you wouldn't step over the line if you knew, well, there's trap doors. Okay, so here's Disneyland. Well, yeah, it looks like, okay, it's fun, but we put a bunch of secret trap doors all over the place. And some of them are little, you get diabetes or something. Well, I shouldn't say that's little. It could be, you can live with it, but that's it. Anyway, whatever. Stub toes. Yeah, some trapdoors are not too much. But some of them are going to be, really bad. So the place got some really bad trapdoors in it. And some of them are hard to fall into. They're, only this big. You can barely squeeze through them. They're not very high odds like ALS or something. But there is an ALS door, in the park. And, one in a, whatever, 200,000, I don't know what that, maybe it's 1 in a million, who knows, will fall through that door, in the park. You'll see them, poof, and why would I go there? Why would I initiate any such risk to myself? I wouldn't. So if it was spelled out that way, I just don't see how people would boldly go to their risking their worst nightmare for what is such a small gain. So little to be truly gained. So I don't, that should be the end of the conversation, really. Just any one of these analogies to what you're doing. Just the idea of when you're having kids of saying, I'm perfectly comfortable with the idea that, I'm just going to pull some straws out of my pocket. And, oh well, short straw, too bad, kid. Like it's happening to me? No. They're just playing this risk game, this gambling game with somebody else's money, and because it's fun to gamble, and that's sort of in us. So that was another analogy I wanted to make, was sort of to movies, and why we have such a resistance to this idea of not existing. Well, not existing is sort of like ending the movie. And unfortunately, the story doesn't have it's like a soap opera. Nothing ever really comes to a conclusion. Your life is really a whole bunch of stories that are in progress, and every day I might resolve one of the stories. Well, this story's solved, but I haven't solved that story, and I haven't solved that one, and I haven't written an ending for this one yet, and that one. So all these other pieces to the story haven't finished, and it's really irritating. Like say if you were to watch a movie and the power goes out, and you're like, fuck, I gotta know what happens. I'm curious. I know it'll be stupid. Because we can even know it's going to be a stupid ending. It'll suck. But I want to know what it is. And we confuse that unfinished, looking at the unfinished thing and seeing the defect, and we confuse that for a reason to finish it. Like somehow that justifies finishing it because I need to have the finish. I need it to end. I need the completeness of the circle. I mean, I've drawn 95% of the circle and I left a little gap, and it's just such an obvious gap. You got to finish the rest of the circle. And so we're fighting more to finish than we are fighting to start. And people are just confusing the two because I'm addicted to existing, and finishing my story, that somehow I'm endorsing story writing. Like, don't even make the doctor and the nurse and the affair and the whole complex. Don't even make the soap opera, and then you don't have to finish it. Don't start watching this stupid, dumb, retarded, idiotic movie, and then you won't need to see how the stupid, retarded, dumb, idiotic movie ends. Not that complicated. Because really the only thing that's keeping us in the game is addiction. So don't, I've made this example before. It's not that different than a heroin addict. We're addicted to the relief, the good moments, the escape of the bounds of our physical limitations, and we're addicted to it. That's all. If we don't get it, we degrade and we're panicked, and so we're fighting to get out of the swamp of poverty or sadness or depression or whatever the thing is, and we're fighting to climb out of it. And all that's so it's the fear of the negative that is propelling people. It's not some real striving for a greater positive. They're not looking to gold plate the sand on their paradise beach. I mean, if you're on Paradise Beach, you don't need gold sand and silver trees, and you really don't need to do all that crap unless you're just desperately bored. But no, you're usually fighting for warmer temperature and a more comfortable, breathable air, and clean water and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the real number, it's the kind of thing that's just so numbingly depressing that, you have maybe 2 billion people on this planet who every day have to fight just to get some clean water. And there doesn't seem to be any energy to say, how did we get in that mess? I mean, that's not really, that's just so bad. I mean, why are we allowing that? Why are we allowing people to have kids where they don't have clean water to drink? I mean, that's so little a nest they're laying the eggs in. They don't even have straw one on the nest. I mean, not even nothing. Absolutely nothing. They don't even have clean fucking water. And they're breeding. What the fuck? That should be the reaction people have. Is you can't sustain that negative condition. So perpetuating it is retarded. Stepping into a Disneyland that bad, that broken, that retrified, okay, just so covered with moss and rusty and radioactive and just a shithole. To step over that threshold is really retarded. To impose that on your kids is just so fucking insane. But anyway, too crazy. But that's probably another way to turn this whole storytelling around. It's almost like there are people who are walking into the mental institution with their children. They're throwing their children across into the nut house, into a shithole, with the dream that somehow will make people live better in a Disneyland. They're all part of this exploitiness economy, and they go to work, and they're going to work to make other people's lives better, and sentence their own kids to slave labor. It's just so stupid. And the fact that, again, most people in civilized countries should be smart enough to see that. But let's understand, most people in civilized countries aren't breeding. So if it wasn't for the importation of the huddled, overbreeding masses, their native populations would have stopped growing long ago, and their populations would be declining. They'd be going extinct, essentially. So it's just ironic that the argument for antinatalism only needs civilization to win. That's all it needs. Because as soon as people become civilized, they become less invested in this risk-taking and in this whole project of managing consciousness and being responsible for it, and thinking there's any real reward in making a mess. And it's usually going to be a mess. The odds are your kids will make a mess. There isn't any evidence that most new humans who arrive on Earth won't be mess makers. Very few of them will be highly productive and incredibly useful to the world. Very, very few. Most will just be expensive. They'll just consume resources, cause pain, get divorced, do all the bullshit, get nowhere, end up fat and crippled. All right. So, yeah, it's almost saying enough. So that was another analogy I wanted to use, but fallen from my current observation perspective. So let's play a little bit of this, and then we'll call it a morning or a day. Take me a while to render the videos and all that crap.
And him, remember me?
No.
Hi, Inmendham. Hi.
No, I have no clue at all. Your sort of generic crazy ass on the internet. So yes, from like Stickam or something. You know, like everybody in Stickam was a little bit like this.
Remember me? From the past, remember Stickam? Remember Blog TV?
It was Stickam. He was from Stickam. Yeah, yeah. But I don't remember you. Melton John. So there's another guy who just... See, that's a sort of a trespass. You know, that's sort of an unfairness. You don't really have the right to take somebody else's face or somebody else's persona that they've earned, so to speak, and you don't really have a right to wear it. It's just kind of bullshit. It's a bullshit tactic. It's cheating. Simply. I don't think you'd want people doing that with you. You know, your real identity.
Stickam, that's right. I used to troll in your
I used to troll. Yeah, I used to
Google
troll.
sucks again. Yeah, we know Google sucks. Yeah, Google. It's all Google's fault. Everything's Google's fault.
Well, frankly, the destruction of the internet is Google's fault. They're turning it into this lousy, rotten. I mean, there's more programming code in web pages engineering ad display than there is content display. So, I mean, it's 90% of the weight of a web page or its dysfunction is because it's doing things it shouldn't be doing, like watching what you're doing, trying to find out who you are, doing all of this crap that the internet should have never been about. We should have never let it be this capitalist whorehouse. It's just disgusting how it's turned to shit. And by a company who said, we're not evil, when they lied about their objective. Their objective originally was to do one thing, provide a non-commercial alternative. It says it right in the origin papers, a non-commercial alternative. Right, because Yahoo and AltaVista and some of the other companies, they had ads all over the place. They were turning into crooks too to make money, so Google gave it away for free. Like William Randolph Hearst, they actually lost money, for 2 years. Now, do you want to compete in a world where you're going to open your little store and sell, widgets? And then somebody opens a store right next door and he can afford to lose money for 5 years. So he can sell the stuff much cheaper than you. Cut your, you have to pay your mortgage and you got to pay to get your kids through college. You got to do all this other stuff. Well, how are you going to do that if you can't make a profit? Because the other guy's willing not to make a profit. So he's going to beat you and he's going to become a monopoly. And that's all that's all Google did. So it says, we're not evil. Don't Be Evil was its theme song, which was idiotic when their whole plan was to be insanely evil. I mean, just preposterously evil. That was their whole plan, was to be evil. I mean, I can't say from the very beginning, but they figured out pretty quickly what the play would be. And the play would be is we'll drive everybody else out of business. We won't have a single ad anywhere. And then they did something that when Microsoft proposed this, Microsoft proposed, 3 or 4 years before Google, that they would have ads in Internet Explorer. So in the browser, they would already have ads. And then companies could choose, like I had a website, I could choose to have the browser display an ad. So it would be built into the browser. So it would be very low overhead because everybody would have it on their hard drive, essentially. The ads would essentially be on your hard drive. You wouldn't even have to download them. You wouldn't even have to use your bandwidth to download them. And, I could just make a deal with Internet Explorer, with Microsoft, and just say, put ads on my page, in the browser. When people look at my page, there'll be an ad in the browser. And everybody went nuts. Microsoft is evil. Microsoft is evil. And that's so much better than what Google did, right? So a couple years later, Google comes up with this idea. No, we'll put the ads in your page, We'll serve them into your page, and you'll get a percentage of the money. It's a less efficient mechanism, and it's just decidedly evil in the sense that it just creates completely negative incentives in terms of you can make money by getting views. views are money. So it doesn't have anything to do with the content having some mechanism to pay for itself. It just has to do with get the views, get the money. And then that's how YouTube was created. So that's all documented fact. YouTube wouldn't exist if it wasn't for these guys having an idea that, well, let's just steal copyrighted content, but we won't do the stealing. We'll let our users steal it, so we can't go to jail, right? And we'll display the copyrighted content for the user, but yeah, it's their fault. They published it, so we won't be directly legally responsible. And they did the thieving. They encouraged the people to steal. They prevented it with very weak, they just pretended to try to, like, don't do that. Oh, that's wrong. But we're not going to do anything about it. I mean, they were in on it in every way, just to sell it as soon as it had the view number. So as soon as they were getting the, whatever, 2 million views a day, it's when they knew they could make big bucks by selling it, and that's exactly what they did. And who bought it? The bigger evil, Google. I mean, just, yeah, that's the truth, fuckhead.
You always like to yell at Google. Hey, Google, shut the fuck up.
I don't yell at Google. I yell at the other human beings who have been on the internet, and the fact that they are just scapegoating asshole dipshits. Because clearly Microsoft, they could see Microsoft was evil. And merely because Google had a silly name, okay, and it was supposed to be created by 2 college students, like somehow that's not exactly how Microsoft was fucking created. It's the same blueprint all over again. Microsoft ripped you off for decades on an operating system that the only reason why it was worth anything was because IBM was too stupid to buy it outright and rented it from Bill Gates. By renting it, because they didn't think computers were going to go anywhere, by renting it, they got stuck in a long-term contract that meant all of us had to pay rent, okay, to run our computers. But that's all. That's the only reason why it exists. And so Bill Gates made his money not by doing anything smart in terms of anything good for humankind or anything like that. He merely chicaned us into putting a rental contract on the round wheel, so everybody had to pay a copyright fee for round wheels. I mean, it's just nonsense. Fundamental infrastructure being copyrighted like that. It's just bullshit. But anyway, and Google did the same thing, though. It's the same pattern, same bullshit.
Hey, Google, play me a song, and it doesn't listen to you. Hey, Google. Hey, Google. Yeah, Inmendham,
Inmendham. I mean, these people are just so psychotic. They can't even say a name right after a decade, literally more than a decade of hearing it, and he still can't get it right.
I think you get more brain dead too as we go. We all are, though. Don't worry about it.
Well, look what's high. Look what's talking. I don't think your brain was ever alive. You got one of Piero's Pyramecium brains.
Yell at cars all
Yeah, whatever.
the time in traffic. I yell at them when I'm a passenger. I'm becoming like you, Inmendham. The older I get, the more cynical I'm getting, the more dastardly I'm getting, and the more I wish bad things on people.
Yeah, well, that's not a good thing. But it's hard to resist. Because deserve seems like a perfectly good way to fix everything. Just give everybody what they deserve. So if they invest in Alzheimer's, let them get the fucking Alzheimer's. They invest in giving people cancer, well, let them get the fucking cancer. Yeah, if you're for it, you should get it. Okay? If you're for the war, you should be the one catching the first bullet. Fuckhead.
This is scary shit, ain't it?
Yes, you are scary. I have to admit that, you got the perfect profile. I mean, you are profilable. Now, I have to treat every seemingly psychotic person as an individual, and I can't blame you for looking exactly like perfect homogenation of Bundy, Dahmer, and Gacy. Yeah, I mean, you've got Gacy's eyes and Dahmer's little smile. you're fucking crazy, it seems. But hey, no foul. You might be a totally innocent crazy person.
And here, I'm watching you. The dumbass comments, yeah?
Yeah, that was perfect timing. Oh, man. Okay. Well, this is entertaining, I have to admit. But that's a kind of, watching retards fall down. It's fun, but it's not quite right.
Wanted to, we gotta do that, right? Inmendham, you're a legend around here. You've been here many years, acting like a psycho. You know, but it's a...
Well, a completely different kind, I must admit. I mean, it's a whole different kind of psycho. I mean, my clown suit is completely different than yours.
Right, we're all psychos, you know, to a point.
There you go. That's the problem. We're all psych. We have this stupid, emotional, physiological, subjective, conditioned preferences and attachments to our little mannerisms and our little way. I have the right way to blow your nose, the right way to lick a stamp, the right way. There's right ways and wrong ways, and blah, blah, and all this bullshit. And that's all bullshit. And people are so caught up in thinking that bullshit is the meaningful part. My subjective horse shit is meaningful. No, what's meaningful is that you have shit. Whether it's horse or bull or dog, doesn't matter. It's shit. And the shit has to be dealt with. Not what kind of shit it is.
Comments, this is the guy I'm talking about here. Take a look at this. That's him. What the fuck, 6'11"?
Well, at least he's current. So that's good. But yes, I was. Well, look, I have to concede, I was more entertaining in the past. But yeah, I just got better attempting to be more constructive in my approach, more understanding and empathetic to people being quite different than me and not understanding me. So I have to try to be more understandable by becoming less me and more something else. Yeah, something less destructive to the purpose, you could argue. So that's where I am now, less destructive to the purpose. But I'm still I still have way too many defects. So, I mean, eventually I'll just try to be, Bill Buckley or something. I don't know. That's probably a bad example because he was destructive to his own purpose by being so pompous.
This guy's fucking great. I knew him for years already.
Yes. But anyway, enough of that. Let's see what he says later, maybe. Just a little bit more.
Used to kick me back in the day. I would forget it. But
yeah, you should forget it. It's, it's crimes from the deep past. Just let it go, fella. I don't know. Trolls who can't understand, they're so happy when they break things and disrupt things and damage things, and yet they seem to understand the concept of their own frustration with being able to do that, and how they don't like it when I can't do my destructiveness very well because you prevent me from doing it, you block me, or you're stopping me from being destructive. And it's like they can understand that sensation, but they can't understand the other side to it, where somebody would rationally take those measures because they consider you being completely destructive to what they're trying to accomplish. So it is funny just how these conversations always come kind of down to the fact that people are so blinded, by how hypocritical and duplicitous everything they're saying or doing is. How they wouldn't want the standards they're imposing to be applied to themselves and all that kind of stuff. And they haven't done any of that personal, what am I really doing here on Earth? How big a mess am I really making? What is my blood footprint? And it seems to me, my brain says, well, that's the first thing you do. Before you step across a line, there's a line on the ground, you find out, what's the consequence of me stepping over the fucking line? What's really going to happen? Seems like the logical thing to do. You don't step before you figure out what stepping means. You don't sign contracts without taking a cursory look at them. I know in some practical way nowadays you have to sign shit, because you need a day or two to fucking go through this course shit. Which is worth mentioning. YouTube has done its changing of its terms of service, and they say, oh, the changes are benign and they won't affect you in any way, and there's no problem. But they've changed the language of their, giving themselves a few more rights. And somebody emailed me a little piece of text that, they've changed it. I can't remember what the old version was. They used to reserve the right to cancel your account because of bad behavior or, some endangerment to their corporate reputation or, that kind of shit. And they basically just changed it to as soon as you're commercially unviable. So, which is kind of funny, right? Because there's so many accounts that don't have any commercial use. So you could argue that every single troll account has no commercial value unless you're clicking ads, right? So I was thinking about it, I'm saying, so if you're a user of YouTube and you click ads, they would say you're in our interest because you're making our ads more valuable because you're clicking them. And then if you're a content producer and you don't have any ads, well, that's no good because you have no commercial value, so they can kill you. And they'll certainly kill you if you don't click ads. So I'm in both negative categories. I don't got ads on my videos, so they have no commercial interest in keeping my channel alive. Or they have a right now, an explicit right, to just kill the channel without giving me any courtesies at all. And I don't click ads. But the only thing that could save me, is that they'd have to show that they treated everybody like that. So they'd have to kill every channel that is run by somebody who doesn't click ads and doesn't provide ads on their videos. So they'd have to kill all of them. Or else I'd just say discrimination, I'll say I'm a protected class and say, fuck you, you can't do that. I'll try anyway. But yeah, they are just so suable. And it's just unfortunate there's no honest judges to sue them in front of. That's what it comes down to. It's just so bad. The system is so bad. So broken. So, anyway, enough of a video. I believe that's enough. I'm declaring it so. That's all you get for today. So I will try to make more videos. It's just so many things to do. And yeah. Sucks. Alright, so until next time and such. So forth and whatnot. See ya, fella.